The year is 1977 and audiences watch a mysterious entity known as Darth Vader. All you see in the 9 minutes of screen time is that Darth Vader is a powerful force feared by his imperial officers who dare not to mess with him. He doesn't waste a single word with his deep mechanical breaths.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
And his intimidating costume and mask, which strips him of his humanity, making him feel more like a machine than a human. This absent looming threat is left for our imagination to fill in the blanks. All these questions in our head add mystery, suspense and tension. A mysterious villain is whose identity is hidden behind a mask, makeup or disguise. A character who lacks a clear backstory or motivation. Audiences are forced to pay attention to the villain's actions and motivation as we're trying to figure them out, which eventually gives the audience a possibility for a big emotional payoff.
I am your father.
A villain who reveals everything too early loses their grip on the audience. Mystery creates unpredictability, and that's the key to keeping audiences on edge. The less we know about them, the more terrifying they become, as our imagination fills in the blanks. In No Country for Old Men, Anton Chigurh is an unpredictable force with no clear motivations or backstory. He feels more like a force of evil rather than a person. The mystery around this character, who he is and why he kills, puts the audience on edge by keeping us guessing who his next victim will be. This is a very common villain in movies, like the Terminator or Michael Myers, who are both mysterious killing machines. Myers is meant to be a force of pure evil by not showing the motives or the human behind the plain white mask and leaving it a mystery. They never explain why Michael turned into a killer. He's just simply a force of evil and the audience is left to imagine it on their own. This creates suspense in the movies. As we don't know his motives, we aren't sure who's next on his kill list, which makes him so much more terrifying. When a movie reveals too much about a villain, like in the newest Ant-Man movie where they kept telling us how scary Kang the Conqueror is, which is an example of what not to do. They spent half the film telling you how menacing this character is, how he's so threatening and his overwhelming power.
He said he was a traveler, a scientist who crashed off course. He had a ship beyond anything I had ever seen. I'd never met anyone like him.
That when we finally meet the character, our expectations are through the roof and the suspense is just gone. Especially when it just gets beaten by a bunch of ants. This doesn't just ruin this Kang, but all the versions for me. With Thanos, we saw him slowly make progress to achieve his goal by fighting his underlings until an eventual matchup in Infinity War. By letting Thanos be absent for most of the previous movies, we compound the suspense of this character. Early Marvel also did this well with the Winter Soldier. Cap is fighting the Winter Soldier, an unknown mysterious man who is a master when it comes to combat and weapons. We see he has a mask on and we're left to wonder about his identity. In the shootout, part of his mask comes off, which eventually shows his humanity. Eventually Cap manages to remove his mask fully and we get to see that the Winter Soldier is Bucky Barnes, who was a friend who was thought to be dead from the previous movie, but doesn't recognize Cap's, which even adds more mystery.
Bucky? Who the hell is Bucky?
This is a satisfying emotional payoff for the audience who watched the previous movie. I'm not saying a backstory is always terrible and ruins the villain. It can add a lot of depth in some cases. Anakin Skywalker, the man behind Darth Vader, begins as a promising Jedi with a talent and a tragic backstory. His fall to the dark side of the Force is driven by a combination of fear, loss and manipulation.
Is it possible to learn this power?
A timeless tale where the hero gives in to their inner demons and becomes evil. The payoff in the tragic climax of Revenge of the Sith is so emotional as it completely flips the hero's journey on his head and you can't help but sympathize with him, feeling the pain and struggle Anakin goes through. It's still emotional watching it today because you know how his fate eventually ends. One of the greatest mysterious villains who lacks an origin is the Joker in The Dark Knight.
I believe whatever doesn't kill you simply makes you strange.
I won't talk too much about him because everything has probably already been said. His origin in this universe is so unknown, which fits perfectly into the character as an unpredictable villain. Every time he explains his scars, it's a different story. First time he says his father did it, and the next time it was to make his wife happy. It's like he's just making it up on the spot. You don't really know what he's gonna say or do next. What's terrifying about him isn't just his actions, but that we don't know why he's doing them. He exists just to create chaos, which taps into our fear of unpredictability. Enough of this clown, I'll be moving on to another iconic mysterious movie villain, who is also a clown, which is Pennywise from It. The iconic first scene leaves out so much information about what or who he is, like what's he doing in the sewers. There are so many questions that pops into your head with the first scene, which is why it's so iconic. The more we know about any given situation, the less afraid we become. For example, this explains the decline in scariness with each of the Paranormal Activity films. The mystery behind Pennywise is what makes him so terrifying. He can be anyone under the makeup and disguise. Clowns are just terrifying on their own. Who chooses to spend their time hanging out with kids? Is he a demon, an alien? You don't really find this out in the movies, which makes it very suspenseful. Sometimes the villain has an actual mystery around him, like Kaiser Söze from The Usual Suspects, who exists more as a legend than a real villain in the movie. His reputation alone is so terrifying, making everyone fear him without ever even seeing him. The mystery surrounding his identity and motives build throughout the movie, eventually leading to a massive twist, making the audience question everything from before. Söze's mystery feeds on the suspense of not knowing what's real, a tension that only resolves in the movie's final moments, making the character unforgettable.
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.
One of the movies that uses the mysterious villain perfectly is Anton Chigurh, who is played by Javier Bardem. The audience questions everything about him, the way he speaks, his appearance, his accent, and much more.
What's the most you ever lost on a coin toss?
Sir?
The most you ever lost on a coin toss.
We assume he has a Hispanic origin, but it's never really confirmed. He seems very out of place with the people he's killing. His motivation is unclear, and it appears just to be to finish his job, or maybe he's in it for the thrill of the hunt. It's not really clear if he's chasing the money for himself or his employer. He seems very intentional with every action and does not kill unless necessary. He has a very systematic way of approaching his goals and duty. In one scene, he shoots his employer for hiring the Mexicans to hunt after moss alongside him. Even though he's murdered one of the men at the company, he would still deliver the case back to them, since he never states that he wants to claim the money for himself. I think it's within the character to be a person who isn't concerned with money and is rather in it for the thrill of the hunt, like I said. The suspense of not knowing who his next kill will be makes him so terrifying. He's truly an agent of chaos, letting something as simple as a coin toss decide someone's fate, whether someone lives or dies. This way their fate is taken out of his responsibility. We don't even know exactly why he does this. Maybe it's the justification for his killings, a way to distance himself, but you shouldn't distance yourself from me, and subscribe.